Comey was spying on Trump. Well, the reason he was writing the memos was to create a record so that he could destroy
No
him.
American knowingly colluded with the Russians to interfere in our election campaigns. Oh, wait, unless you mean Hillary Clinton. Pardons, prosecutions, and transparency.
Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update here on social media. Another busy week here at Judicial Watch. We have new documents about Fauci's NIH and COVID and China. I'll tell you the latest there. Plus, we are at CPAC this week. I'll be going down there and I'll be giving a speech, and I'll give you a preview of that speech and talk about the current state of affairs here in DC as the rule of law crisis, as I call it, continues. First up is the new documents that we have from the National Institutes of Health. We represented and are actually representing the Daily Caller News Foundation, which had asked for documents tied to China, emails mostly, for Dr. Fauci and his top deputy, Dr. Lane, Cliff Lane. And we had received documents last year, I publicly disclosed them, detailing how in the early days of the COVID crisis, Dr. Fauci responded to an approved, let me take a step back. There was this entity, it's a WHO related entity, and they were putting out material, and they went out of their way in the email traffic saying, we've got to especially praise China's efforts. And Fauci agreed to that press release. They wanted to focus on all the countries. Let me see if I have the specific language from that older press release. This is the latest. The email showing pushing for a press release approved by Dr. Fauci, especially supporting China's COVID-19 response. Now, my guess is you haven't heard about that email and that issue from the big media or big tech. You've heard about it from Judicial Watch and obviously our friends at the Daily Caller News Foundation, who's our client here. So what they've been doing is they've been slow rolling the release of documents. So we've been getting the documents, and there's another batch we've reviewed, and we're going to be releasing officially on Monday, but I'll talk to you about it today. And these are documents, I think they're Fauci's on some of the emails in the larger group of documents, but the specific emails I'm talking about mostly deal with his deputy over there at NIH, Dr. Lane. Again, the lawsuit was filed for communications between Dr. Fauci and Deputy Director Lane and World Health Organization officials concerning the novel coronavirus. Communications of Dr. Fauci and Deputy Director Lane concerning WHO official Bruce Alward, WHO Director General Tedros, I can't read this here, I got to get my glasses, Adhanom, and China. So basically, what our friends at Daily Caller asked for were give us documents about China, COVID, and what was going on early on at NIH about COVID. And as I said, we've been getting the stonewall and the runaround. The fact is we had to sue for the documents. So Dr. Fauci, we're being told, has to review and approve all of his emails before they're released, which is rather unusual given our experience in FOIA. I'm not aware previously of that being the case in any other FOIA litigation. I could be wrong. I mean, any other FOIA litigation that we've been involved in. But I don't remember anything that happened. And we filed hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests. So my memory isn't perfect as I get older. But I've been doing this for 22, 23 years. And I'm unaware of a senior official personally approving, at least admittedly, personally approving the release of his own or her own emails. I'm not, but Fauci, he gets special treatment, it seems. So going back to what the subset of documents show with his deputy, Mr. Lane or Dr. Lane, they show that there was this accommodation given to China on confidentiality and other communication control. There was a confidentiality form that they had previously used, and the emails indicate that they needed to be changed, and they were changed. And this is the phrase they use. The forms this time are tailored to China's terms, so we cannot use the ones from before. Tailored to China's terms. I'm not sure what those terms were, but do you think they're good? Do you think they're on the side of transparency or otherwise accountability? I doubt it. Another WHO briefing package was sent to NIH officials traveling to China as part of the COVID-19 response. And it asked that the officials not share information until they have agreement with China. Important. It's all in caps. Please treat this as a sensitive and not for public communication until we have agreed communications with China. So China seemed to be given some sort of veto power, the way I read this email, over communications concerning COVID. This is why WHO, this is why President Trump pulled the United States of America from WHO, because it was acting as a front for China as opposed to an independent agency that would neutrally pursue public health measures. Now, I was thinking about this today. Whenever you hear the phrase public health or public health experts, kind of check to make sure your wallet's still there. Because I translate that to political. So every time you hear public health, just remember, political. These are political officials, political appointees. They say they're career civil servants, but as you see with Dr. Fauci, he is as political as any United States senator or congressman or president. And arguably, he's given more influence and power than our own elected officials, even though he's appointed. So that's what was going on. And we've exposed it through a lawsuit. It was not exposed by Congress. It was not voluntarily disgorged to our clients, the Daily Caller News Foundation, by NIH. We had to sue for the basic information about what was going on with China and such, and WHO on a public health, I use that phrase again, issue that shut down the entire world. So once again, it's Judicial Watch that comes in to get information that you would think everyone in the country, in the media establishment, and the political class would want access to. Nope. I mean, it really does highlight the corruption of the media, doesn't it? And the corruption of the oversight body that Congress is supposed to be. They have little to zero interest, the community structure in Congress, in conducting real oversight. The media is just about, in many ways, it's not saying they don't do journalism here and again and don't do something useful in terms of highlighting government misconduct and abuse and just telling us what the government's up to. But kind of the energy is directed towards advancing ideological narratives and, more dangerously, suppressing opponents. So anything that undermines the credibility of the government agencies that now that Dr. Fauci's the head of, he's been head of it for some time, at least this particular aspect of the NIH, they don't want to cover, they don't want to pursue, they don't want to ask any questions about. And this is why Judicial Watch's work is so important. The Daily Caller News Foundation is the exception that proves the rule. They're asking for questions because they're serious journalists here. Judicial Watch, in my view, does more serious journalism in terms of exposing and educating Americans about what the government's up to than the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all the big media combined, especially on the issues of government corruption. So what else did we find? And there was also a strategic study, there was a study, I wouldn't call it a study, they called it an epi-analysis, which I took to mean epidemiological analysis of COVID. And how did they want to handle that? They wanted to handle that is it shall not be further disseminated. So there was a secret analysis that was done that we don't know much about beyond what the email says. So it was marked by these emails show secrecy and accommodations to China. And as I said already, there was a press release that went out of its way in terms of describing the response to coronavirus, went out of its way specifically with the Fauci's approval, and this is the previous documents we've uncovered, to praise China. And as I said in my comment, these new emails show that WHO and Fauci's NIH had special accommodations to the Chinese communists' efforts to control information about COVID. I mean, the emails are going to be out, and they're going to be out on Monday. You can look at them when they come out, and you can draw your own conclusions. But that's my analysis of it. I mean, COVID is, we could have an entire judicial watch, there's enough for Judicial Watch to do nothing but COVID investigations in terms of the disruption to our economy, the destruction of our of jobs, the undermining of our liberties, the misconduct and abuse in suppressing information related to COVID. I mean, as I said before, and it bears repeating because it's outrageous, I am still locked out of Twitter over an innocuous tweet I made about hydroxychloroquine. Completely innocuous, and one that had specifically the language I sometimes repeat tweets because I recognize that people don't see the tweets initially, so I repeat them so more people see them. And the language I had used repeatedly had specifically been complained about before by Twitter. And Twitter found that the language was not in violation of its terms of service. But all of a sudden, they told me I needed to take it down. And even if I did, I'd be locked out for 7 days. So I appealed it. And it's now 6 weeks later. They haven't done jack on it. So the tweet was accurate. It was true. It didn't even mention COVID. It didn't mention COVID. Didn't mention COVID. But what is the science behind the masks? What is the science behind social distancing? What is the science behind mass lockdowns of people who are seemingly healthy? There is no science behind it in the terms of credible science that's been tested, as Fauci would have us test emerging treatments, meaning you have a randomized controlled study, the gold standard, right? You got a group X, you got group Y. X has the placebo, Y has the intervention, and you figure out if it works. There's no science behind any of the interventions, as best I can tell in that regard. There's some observational studies which we're told don't work for certain treatments, but do work for masks. What's, for instance, the basis for 6 feet separation? I'm asking, tell me, why not 5 feet? Why not 12 feet? Shouldn't it be long? Should be more? And more importantly, what is the basis for mass lockdowns that have never been used in world history, never before used to control the spread of anything? I mean, there have been restrictions on public events, I guess, during the 1918 epidemic, but modest and short term. I mean, Fauci is now saying, initially said that you shouldn't wear masks. Then he said you should wear masks. And he said, even if you're vaccinated, we'll have to be wearing masks, even if the country, I shouldn't say even if you are. Well, I think he has said, even if you are vaccinated, you should still be careful about your activities, meaning restrict your public activities. So when I say political, I mean political. I mean, the good news is we have some of these vaccines that it combined with the fact that people are getting increased natural immunity to COVID and top of the vaccines, we should be in a position where even the lockdown fanatics won't be able to persuade anyone that continued lockdowns are appropriate. Our children are being locked out of their schools. That's what I'm concerned about. Who's standing in the schoolhouse door against our children? They can't get in to do what kids want to be able to do and what the parents want them to be able to do, which is to learn and not be traumatized. So we got a bunch of Freedom of Information Act requests on this. We're getting more documents that as we speak. So stay tuned for more there. So the other big news this week is, there's a lot of awful things going on here in Washington in terms of policy. There's legislation, and I encourage you to kind of pay attention to that because the left is trying to ram through a lot of dubious legislation. And I'm not in the business too much of Judicial Watches and of highlighting legislative issues and things like that. But, there's this Equality Act, which attacks the First Amendment and traditional Christians, attacks women's sports in many ways, is pro-abortion. Secondly, it's then there's the COVID, which is just waste, fraud, and abuse. That's just straight up waste, fraud, and abuse. That's why that COVID bill should be looked at with skepticism, besides the fact our government's broke, so we don't have the money to spend. But the other big political news this week is CPAC. And CPAC is an organization that every year it's a big conference of conservatives. And the movement gets together and talks to each other. They have political leaders come in. And I'll be speaking on Sunday, Sunday afternoon about noon. So I hope you are able to tune in. I think we'll be live streaming it on the Judicial Watch YouTube channels and other social media on Facebook and such. And that's the afternoon. President Trump is closing out the speech a little bit after I talk. So it should be an exciting time. But CPAC is under attack by the left because CPAC is daring to ask questions about election integrity. Right? And the left doesn't want any questions about election integrity being asked. They don't want any reforms of election law to make it more secure, elections to be more secure. They don't want more voter ID. They don't want questions about what happened in 2020. I mean, they're not satisfied that President Biden is President Biden. They don't want anyone to ask any questions about how the elections were administered in 2020. You're not allowed to ask them. If I ask the wrong question right now, here and now, YouTube will take this video down. And who knows what the other or as offensively, they will label it with false information about vote by mail and things like that. So all of that energy now to suppress conservatives and criminalize the opposition to the left-wing socialist, rising communist agenda in some respects is being focused on CPAC. So they're trying to controversialize and cancel CPAC more or less. And the media tried to do that early on because Judicial Watch has been a sponsor of CPAC for many, many years now. And the media was calling around it looked like to me, trying to get people to stop sponsoring CPAC. And I'm like, I'm not even going to return the reporter's call. It's ridiculous. And so Matt Schlapp of CPAC is rightly highlighting the election issues because I know you're concerned about it, right? Tens of millions of Americans voted for President Trump are concerned about election integrity. Many Democrats are concerned about election integrity. But the media says we're not allowed to talk about it. So CPAC is being attacked. And of course, President Trump is speaking, which is going to be big news separate and apart from the left's craziness about undermining election integrity. You have President Trump and his potential candidacy and all sorts of other things that are going to be big news because it's his first speech since since he's left office, right? So it should be big. But what I'm going to be talking about is defending the rule of law. And I think it's worth summarizing again because, those of you who follow me and follow this video and follow other Judicial Watch work, you kind of know where I'm going here. I've read our book, for instance, my Judicial Watch book, A Republic Under Attack. Just remember, Trump was targeted to protect Obama, Clinton, and Biden from being investigated and, as in the case of Biden, prosecuted. Trump is a crime victim. His civil rights were violated. Illicit spying on an American citizen is a crime. The sham impeachment was an abuse of him. Sham impeachment 1 was abuse of him and his civil rights. Sham impeachment 2 was an abuse of him and his civil rights. And in the center of this mess was the FBI and the Justice Department and the other agencies like Brennan's CIA. But of course, Obama and Biden in the White House there. So they were spying on him. They continued spying on him after he took over the presidency. And rather than pursue justice against the abuse that the Justice Department had been involved in, unsurprisingly, the Justice Department continued the abuse. And even when it was exposed, they slow rolled the release of information to protect those implicated. And John Durham, for instance, he's been out there for almost 2 years now, still nothing from Durham. They had one prosecution. In my view, that was even mishandled. And through it out at all has been Judicial Watch. We highlighted the corruption of the Mueller appointment, highlighted the corruption of the Mueller process before pretty much anyone else said or did anything about it. Remember, all the Republicans used to say, well, I really respect Robert Mueller. I trust Robert Mueller. I didn't trust Robert Mueller because Judicial Watch has been around the block once or twice. We knew what Mueller was about because we had a prior experience with his corruptly run FBI that he was responsible for. We knew what was up. So Judicial Watch had done its own investigations into Obamagate. Judicial Watch did its own investigation. We uncovered all the Clinton corruption, the consequences from which she was being protected by the Justice Department under the Trump administration. And now we're in the Biden administration. And never before, as a president faced, has there been such significant evidence, at least in modern American history, of personal corruption by the sitting president. I mean, we're supposed to forget about the Hunter Biden scandal and the fact that he's the big guy and he was getting a cut according to documents, that he was directly involved in these rackets that Hunter and others were involved in with Ukraine and China. Heck, there's an FBI investigation that was suppressed. They covered it up for 2 years. Again, part of the Justice Department, FBI, institutional corruption. And there's still no special counsel for Biden. Judicial Watch has done more to uncover what went on there than the Justice Department. Rudy Giuliani deserves a medal for what he's done in uncovering the Biden corruption. And this corrupt city, this Washington, D.C., has zero interest in pursuing these corruption allegations. Zero interest. Have you heard one Republican leader call on a special counsel to investigate Joe Biden? No. And on top of that, we've got the undermining of confidence in the elections. The Supreme Court, in an outrageous decision, in my view, refused to take up the Pennsylvania challenges about the way the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania and others improperly and unconstitutionally messed with the election processes. I encourage you to read Justice Thomas's decision, and maybe we'll put the link there, or his dissent for the refusal. Said it'd be catastrophic if we don't get a handle on this. Who's responsible for running presidential elections? The state legislature, under the court, under the Constitution, or others? And the courts have wanted to grapple with that, including the Supreme Court. It's an outrageous dereliction of duty. Outrageous. And so, once again, Judicial Watch is doing the lifting there. We're in court now trying to clean up election rolls. We've already successfully done so in other states. In California, we had a settlement with California. LA County's in the process of removing potentially up to, I think, 1.6 million names. We shouldn't be on the rolls. State legislatures are beginning to pay attention, thankfully, on some of these election integrity issues. Justice Department is AWOL. It was AWOL under Barr, and it's going to be AWOL obviously under Barr. It's going to be worse than AWOL. They're going to be you have to remember, under the Obama Justice Department, which was working with the hardcore left. So many of the lawyers in the Justice Department, especially in the areas of law that we're concerned about, are left-wing activists. And so it doesn't really matter who's running it. They just don't want to do any work that a conservative might want to do. And of course, when friendlies come in ideologically, it becomes a nightmare for those of us concerned about the rule of law in terms of voting and things like that. And under the Obama administration, they enforced civil rights law in a racially biased way. You can look at the IG report. You can look at the improper intervention and the lies about the intervention in the Black Panthers voter intimidation issue up in Philadelphia. And that same crowd, or their ideological allies, are about to come back into the Justice Department. I mean, Merrick Garland, he had a reputation for being a pretty moderate judge. I don't know if you watched his or sort of reports about his confirmation hearing, but I was shocked. I guess I shouldn't be shocked, but I'm an optimist. That's why I kind of get outraged all the time, because I kind of want things to go well, and I get outraged when they don't, because I think that's the way things ought to be. But I was shocked that he either didn't know about these key issues like immigration. I mean, he wasn't willing to commit about whether it was illegal to cross the border or not. So that's how the Justice Department is going to be run. And his number 2 deputy, Vinita Gupta, or the proposed number 2 deputy, is a hardcore leftist, a radical. I remember her pushing the smears of Justice Kavanaugh, falsely accusing him of the worst types of crimes. And I think the head of the Civil Rights Division would be Kirsten Clark. She's terribly radical. I remember her she would come after me on Twitter. Who is this person? Why is she going out of her way to attack me? Well, she's going to be running the Civil Rights Division if the Senate confirms her later this year or whenever. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is developing an independent civil society, and Judicial Watch is the leader in that regard. Because when it comes to highlighting the need to enforce the rule of law, whether it be on election integrity, government corruption, immigration, the Biden administration is trying to grant amnesty. They're not even waiting for an amnesty bill to be passed. They're just trying to grant amnesty in effect already, practically speaking. You need a group like Judicial Watch to kind of highlight these issues, investigate what went on, uncover it, pressure government agencies to either cease to stop doing bad things or to do the right thing. Amazing what that would be if that happened. because we can't trust the Justice Department or the FBI. We can't. They've been involved in criminal corruption, in my view. And now it's going to be run by ideologues, or they'll have free reign, and we know how that's going to work. So this is why you need independent groups like Judicial Watch to investigate these independently and try to get the word out. And that's why they want to suppress us. That's why I've been targeted. That's why Judicial Watch has been targeted. It's probably why you've been targeted, because I know many of you have been suppressed online as well. This is what the second impeachment was about, targeting you. Suggesting that you're a terrorist because you want voter ID or something like that. Or you question whether we should have the whole country on lockdown. I mean, that's not liberalism. That isn't even leftism. That's communism. That's really communism. And I don't use the word communist a lot. I don't. But there's been this rising totalitarianism, this rising communism that tries to outlaw all opposition. That's what totalitarians want to do. They want to outlaw opposition. You had members of Congress writing letters to cable providers to try to get what looked like to me to get OANN, Fox News, and Newsmax taken down. I've been warning about this for months. It wasn't about just taking Trump down and deplatforming Trump. It was about deplatforming everyone. Everyone who said something outside the state media complex. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So I've been working on the speech, and I'm looking forward to visiting with you. If you're down there, I hope you're able to say hello. It's a big crowd, so sometimes I'm not able to say hello to everyone I'd like to, but I'm looking forward to CPAC this year. The left isn't going to keep us away, and the left isn't going to stop us from telling the truth. And I encourage you that if you follow Judicial Watch, you go to our website, you share your emails and your snail mail address, your home address with us, so we can keep in contact with you in case the left tries to deplatform us as well. So with that being said, I got to get back to writing my speech for CPAC, and I will see you, I think, next week. I may not be able to do this next week, but I'll be trying to keep you updated one way or another here on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update.